Hello everyone, my name is Nicolas Tobias and I've been teaching watercolor painting for many years. Today I invite you to join me in creating a true masterpiece.
I'm going to take up this blue. Remember, it's got a little bit of purple in it, but it's still mostly blue. I'm going to hold this just to make sure it's relatively straight because it's a little bendy. Maybe I might abandon the uh, tape underneath in a second. We'll just see how it works. But what you want to do is make sure, yeah, this is nice and wet. See how it's running down because it's wet. This is lovely. It sort of guarantees that you're going to get a nice smooth wash. So I'm just going to make sure this is nice and covered with that blue because if you wet the back and the front, everything's wet. There's a lot of water. It's going to dry lighter. And we want to make sure this is nice and dark there. And what you can actually do is I'm just going to clean my brush a bit, get into this purple, maybe add a bit of blue so there's a bit of a transition, and just let that run down. Now, not for very long. Don't go too far. Let's stay up high. The reason is that's quite a dark purple, right? And we need a bit of this nice pink. So I'm going to abandon what I literally just did there because I added in the orange. So get rid of that. Uh, go into this pink. I just want to get a nice light pinky color here. Look at that. There we go. That's going to help. And make sure you come up and down a bit. Make sure that the transitions are still smooth. Oops, what up? Don't do that. Don't go back in with the blue there. So let's just get this pink again. Nice. When in doubt, clean your brush. If you want these nice smooth colors, clean your brush. So a bit of pink in there. Maybe I'll go a little bit stronger. I think it's gonna dry a little bit, so I'm trying to think about that as well. Maybe I might need a bit of that there. There we go. Now let's move into a bit more now of this sort of orangey pinkiness. There we go. And there's only a little bit of that before we get into some real color here. So let's just go into it with a lot of it. And this is all drying very quick, so I've got to be careful. Hopefully you guys have got a bit more time. Ignore the darker bits, right? We're only caring about the um, we're only caring about this wash, this first wash here. Um, so what I'm going to do is dry the brush, get a bit of this yellow. Maybe this transition is quite strong, so what I want to do is go back like that. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to spray this a little bit. I know it's going to get a bit of this nice starry-like effect in a way, but I'm just sort of concerned that it's drying so fast because of how dry my room is. That I'm going to stop at the horizon, so you can stop there too. And right now we're going to we can use the same brush, we can use a smaller brush, but we're going to get in some of that wispy clouds in the top there. So mix up in that same area, some dark blue, and we're just going to create some wispiness like this, wispy clouds, and hopefully it hasn't dried on you. But if it dries too quick, then that's all part of the learning process. So see that? I'm just trying to make sure that I'm getting in enough time here to get some of these wispiness. Big on top, thinner and smaller as it gets to the horizon line, right? So you see how small they are here? So just nice and thin. And this is still wet, so I'm happy. I'm worried about this top bit because it's drying very, very quick. So just get a bit of that strength in there, just in these clouds here. It's pretty much drying on me, so I've got to be careful. But few accents on the top doesn't hurt, does it? Just a nice little wispiness there, like that. So I'm happy with those top clouds. Let's connect them a little bit down here, and then into these nice little bits. And of course, as we get lower, what we can do is, maybe I'll just do a brief few here as well, just to make sure that the, what we can do is change up the color of the clouds. You see how pink it gets, these nice darker highlights. So somewhere where you can mix up a nice stronger pink, maybe muddy it a little bit. You don't want a true pink too much. Maybe muddy it with a bit of that darkness. So it's a bit more of a darker pink there. You don't want too much water on your brush, right? Remember, just a lot of pigment, very little water. And then again, let's just wispy it up. Maybe they can overlap a little bit, but not too much. And we don't want to go too crazy. So in the distance, they need to be very flat. I think I'll stop there. Well, maybe a few little bits there. Okay, just like that. Yeah, it's telling the same story, so I'm happy with that. Now, before this bit dries, it's close to drying potentially. Maybe you'll have to see how dry it is. But let's get a bit of that purple. See the bottom there? There's a bit of that purple, bit of muddiness in the bottom there. So just make sure that what you put onto the paper is thicker than the wash you just made. So this is sort of a milky wash. This needs to be a little thicker. So add more pigment. Don't add water. Make sure it's quite thick, and we can add in that interesting effect happening on the horizon there, like that. Should be okay. Leave a bit of gaps as well. It doesn't have to be the whole way through. And yeah, here, maybe down here. And maybe add some more blue into this bottom bit, like that, just to seal that off a bit on the sides. There we go. So that'll do. Maybe I'll straighten this like that. And we have to leave the sky. Sky is there just to melt and to dry up. And you don't want to add anything more because you're going to lose a bit of that softness if you do anything. But what we can do, don't go with a very wet brush, but just let's just test this edge out, right? So let's just bring this down so that we can refine the sort of a little bit water, not too much water to be honest. Let's just dampen this so that we can refine a bit of um, our line, our wet line there. And if it cauliflowers up a bit, don't worry because you've got dark to add on top of this whole thing. So it's not such a big problem. Maybe you might want to just add a bit of pigment here just to make sure it's not going to bleed too much. But yeah, if it cauliflowers up, doesn't matter. All good. It will be covered anyway.
Painting with watercolors is truly an enjoyable experience that's hard to resist. However, I'd like to make a brief announcement. If you liked painting with me, I'd love for you to join my free workshop where I'll share even more watercolor techniques. Just check out the link in the video description. I'm excited to see you all there. Let's keep creating beautiful art together.
And what do we want to do? We want to replicate the sky. And this will be the end of the first wash, basically. We just want to replicate what we see in the sky. I think that's a little bit too red just for that bottom bit. So get a bit yellow, like so. And just cleaning my brush, drying it a little bit, just so that I can just smooth it out without a lot of water, like so. I just wanted to smooth it before going into what is a bit more of a red or an orangey color. So let's just bring that down like so. See that? And what's next? What's the next color after that? Got red, maybe a bit more of a pinkiness now. Like that. Have a look. I'm not really picking up enough Let's let's do this a bit better. Like that. There we go. Again, mine's trying so quick. Hopefully, you have more time to do all this, but there we go. And then I'll get a bit of blue. I mean, it's quite low here, so not expecting so much, but maybe you just want to get the bottom bit a little bit darker because there's not much, but you want there to be a gradient. So here we go. A few little lines like so, just to show sort of ripples. It's a bit of fun. And a lot of this will be covered with the second reflections that we'll do. So maybe I'll just do a little bits and bobs there. Reflections like that. And like that. There we go. And maybe there's a, there are a little bit of details, a few little smaller shapes. So big shape, medium to small. And of course, in the focal point, we might take a little bit more care to do a bit of this in the water, but it can be, maybe it needs to be come up like this. But yeah, I'm not worried. Maybe there'll be a little line like so, just very subtle. Stick in the heart, something like that. And get rid of that a little bit. Okay, so again, just being very careful with the brush marks to create a nice silhouette. And let's take the tape off. But of course, once the tape's off and you're seeing this sort of nice silhouette there, you have a very crisp, simple scene, right? We've broken it down. I think one thing that it would be a shame not to include, which you actually don't see, is some birds, right? Above the focal point, just bird like that. Maybe I'll dry this, get a bit of dry brush, so a bit more smaller shape. Um, like that. Some birds in the sky, maybe one over here going this way, and then, oops, I got my hand full of this wet stuff. Maybe just some smaller ones here, like that. And I'll bring that up, but you can see just some of these lines, so some of these birds there, and you have yourself a really nice, seaside scene. So final details again that we can try and talk about in the workshop.
This was a day scene. How would you approach it to paint it as one shape? And I think this is very good because you've made it easy to see it as one shape. But if it was in a daytime, how do we simplify into two layers?
Well, yeah, I think it actually becomes a little harder because the silhouette isn't so clear. But that is one of the challenges that we face is seeing all the details in the daytime. So you'll definitely see boats there. You'll definitely see people walking along the pier and all the different bustling activity. But then it's about really breaking down that scene into the silhouette again. And maybe in the daytime, there would be two levels to that silhouette. Maybe there'll be a little bit more distance behind it, maybe more distant masts and things. And maybe just in front, there might be a bit more detail. There might be some boats. So what I would say is we still break it down into the silhouette, but then we might have a little layering in that silhouette in the daytime.
I just read from Francesca. I hadn't read this one. I live in Cyprus and have already signed up. I attended both offline workshops with Konstantin and highly recommend the experience for fun and for art excellent development. Wonderful. And Maria asked, "Oh my God, the price is great. What about plane from Argentina?" And then the plane ticket there is something everyone will have to find themselves because of the reason that everyone lives in different parts of the world. So everything is taken care of from the airport and during the stay. And we have a question from Lily who was, are those buildings or ships or buildings? I can't make it out. And do we need to know that? Is that helpful? What are your thoughts on that, Nick?
Yeah, I mean,
Is it even helpful for us to know that, or can we just try to see it as view it as shapes?
yeah, I think the problem is if you know exactly what you're painting, then your brain might make some decisions for you that you won't that will complicate things. So you might oh, there's a boat there, so then you try and instead of just drawing the silhouette of the top of it, you might be like, well, okay, but I want to actually put the boat in. But what happens if it's behind something? So yeah, treat it as the shape, and then it's about thinking about where are you? We are in a harbor scene, so these are masts, so that is important. Maybe these birds, adding in the birds is important, so that adds to the storytelling element. But yeah, I think it's not like I don't care what's here. I'm sure there's a pier and there might be restaurants here, but because it's so dark, you don't see any of that. Well, good. You don't want your brain to go into overdrive, basically.
So almost like preparing your paints, preparing your mind for what is actually important for my brain to understand and convey, and what is not important. And yeah, not taking
Yeah.
everything as seriously as everything else. Prioritizing.
Yeah, that's why it's good to squint. You look at a scene, squinting is a lot of artists do it. You're actually trying to reduce the power of your eyes and just seeing the shapes and tone in the right way. So yeah,
We had a question from Anne, which was, would you spray the painting once in a while? And if so, on the back or straight onto the painting? So if we have a very dry situation, how do we spray on to to prolong the painting process?
yeah. So well, first thing I do is I'd wet the back every wash. So before the first wash, before the second wash. So that would be vital if it's a very dry environment. And then, yeah, I would be spraying on top of the paper continuously throughout the wash if I want to prolong it. Now, I wouldn't do that if I want a very, very smooth wash because naturally, when you spray, there are going to be water droplets, bigger and smaller, that create a bit of texture, you could say, on the surface. And if you're doing like an architectural scene or something, then that's great because it adds a little bit more depth and texture. But of course, if you want to do a very smooth sky, I still did it anyway, but I just had to because it was drying so fast. But you can't really see. I mean, maybe you've got those two dots there, but actually that just adds a bit of interest. So there are a few little other ones really, but yeah, it adds a bit of fun. But mostly it's smooth, and that's still important.
Thank you so much for that. Let me see. Uh, Beautiful sky, all the colors blending into each other. In real life, when I see these colors in the sky, it looks like a watercolor. That is a very good point. Lydia asks, are the colors stronger on the water in relation to the sky? So that was a question about the reference photo or the reference.
Yes, yes, they are. Yeah, so and it's a short area as well, so the transition's smaller and thicker. So um, yeah, I mean, this is a darker shade of pink to whatever is in this area, and that's sort of important because you don't really want the reflection in the water to compete with the sky. If the sky is the eyes, like in a portrait, the eye is sort of the light and the vibrance and the life of a person in a way, can be. You would say the sky is, and so you want that to be, especially in a scene like this where the the silhouette, the skyline becomes a major part of the painting. This is the life and the light, and you don't want this to compete.
Thank you so much. I think we have probably a few more questions, but it's one of them that I want to ask now, which is from Ina. She wrote previously, I find it difficult to simplify the motive. Everything is so beautiful. What should I paint and what should I leave out? So that's a big question. We will not be able to thoroughly explain that. But do you have some thoughts to add to that, to the discussion of what to put in and what to leave out?
Yeah, I think when you first start out when you're painting on location, you know, when you're traveling or some or you're going somewhere, there'll be a scene that you see that you stop at and you're like, oh, I've got to take a photo. You know, I've got to capture that moment. And so then you've got to think to yourself, what part of that moment actually attracts me? And then when you're there, uh, you then have to build your painting around that moment. So yeah, that's hard to get into a lot. I mean, with regards to what to paint, well, yeah, I paint every subject, so I can't really help there because I think you can see beauty in everything, and for me personally, it's more about um, the light, atmosphere, and mood of a scene compared with the the actual shapes that you're painting. So you can apply, you know, you could apply these colors to a whole variety of scenes. We just happen to be above a harbor. So maybe, yeah, think about what interests you in the sort of mood sense, in the atmospheric sense, and less about the actual type of subjects that you choose to paint.
Thank you so much for that. And if no one else has any pressing questions, I think it might be a good time to wrap up because we've spent a bit over 2 hours together now. So we have some thank yous in the chat, so let me write some of them. Yeah, so Suchi Smita says prepare the colors before. Um, and I'm just reading some of the comments. Thank you for the great workshop from Asia. Much enjoyable. Grazie mille from Ivana. Asia writes much enjoyable. Millie says thank you very much, Nick. And Anne writes thank you very much. Katrin says hello. Lanja says thank you. And Sandrine says thanks for everything. Murthy says wow, Nick is looking much younger without the beard. I
Yeah,
added without the beard. Murthy just wrote much younger. Wanda says thank you very much. Very interested. Oh, we had a new question from Murthy. What are the best plein air tips for beginners, Nick? What is your approach to capturing light and shadow outdoors? We have lots of more thank yous, so it disappeared there in the thank yous. But there was one more question. So let's ask that one as our final question and then we'll wrap up.
what was it? Sorry, it was the tips on
It
plein air.
was the best tips for beginners to and also your approach to capturing light and shadow outdoors.
So for beginners, it's about the materials. I think is very important because you want to set yourself up well. So if you're a beginner, you know you don't have to get a full-on easel professional setup, or you know, I mean for the workshop it would be helpful, but like in general, if you're just starting out, you know you can go at your own pace. But as long as you find a way of being comfortable on location, that's the most important thing. Yeah, paper. Paper is something that beginners really do, you know, don't pay attention to. As Laura said, you know, it's transformative when you work with the best paper. It's a completely different experience. It's basically a different medium. I wouldn't touch cheap paper anymore because it's just frustrating. You just can't do the same thing. So things like that, and then capturing light and mood. Think about tone. I think maybe tone is a real important thing to get. What made this painting more successful was the fact that we could go from dark to light, light to dark, and then have a darker tone on top. to create this scene. And yeah, the sky becomes very important, having the light, and the transitions are important as well, the color. But really, even if it was black and white, the fact that this is light contrasting against this dark is what makes the scene quite interesting. And maybe actually the birds as a final detail help with that as well, you know, just adding a bit of that wispy, not wispy, um, that airy feel, you know, of the sky. So pick up on those little moments if you can, you know, birds, smoke, people working, cows in the field, you know, those little details that create that human feel.
I hope this video was helpful for you. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel where we assist all individuals in mastering drawing skills and immersing themselves in the wonderful world of art. I'd love for you to join me in my free workshop, so follow the link in the video description, and I will see you there soon.